Don't take it as a sign regarding your marriage that you both got sick.
I know, I
Yours is
know.
33.
33, yeah. So they're just a couple days and then you're in
I
Annapolis.
almost didn't notice your wedding picture. Good photo.
I try to look like a Mexican, don't I?
Yay!
Every time people look at that picture, it's like a Mexican.
See.
Si, senor. All right, let's see. I will offend someone if I don't finish. All right. Make sure that's good for John. Yep. Okay.
You just run around here, just like a chicken with his head cut off.
That's right. Yep. No purpose.
All right, tell you what, I'm going to do something here. I'll add a little extra, but it won't hurt anything.
Go ahead.
You don't have to do anything
Well, I like that.
until
Can I help you do anything?
you're good.
Thank
You're streaming and recording, so.
I don't think I've had a day like that in my life ever. Didn't have to do anything.
I don't think so either.
I didn't, in fact, what I had to do, I had to get Debbie to come listen to that telephone message, because I couldn't make him out. I didn't know it was Jared. Sounded like some guy talking Chinese.
Oh, my goodness.
Debbie
Probably didn't feel very well.
decided it. Said, that's Jared. He wants you to be ready to fill in for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It hit him harder than it hit me. I was pretty ill yesterday and during the night, Friday night, but it took him a little longer to get it, but then it's lingering with him longer.
Did y'all eat chicken?
No, we
Chicken?
went. No, we went to Saltgrass Steakhouse. We both had steak, and then I got sick within about 4 hours. And it hit him about 4 hours after it hit me.
Did you eat
You
salad?
just rented your meal, in other words.
Did you eat salad?
I did, but Jared didn't.
Does the steak? Both of y'all had steak?
Yeah.
Where'd you eat?
Sounding good.
Saltgrass Steakhouse.
Down on Memorial?
Very fancy, expensive.
Which,
Remind me
Special
not to eat
occasion.
there.
We went there only down 2 weeks ago.
I mean, we've eaten there a lot of times. It's kind of where we like to go eat if we're going to have steak, but it something. I don't know whether it was that or just coincidence, but got sick that night.
Yeah. Did you have the book?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We went
Debbie-
there and you
Debbie
couldn't
went
get any
over
salt
there.
out of the salt shakers. Every salt shaker, you couldn't get any salt out. And finally, Jim walked and did that and looked, and the top, about that much of the salt was just wet. So they must have a lot of humidity in there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you couldn't get.
Donna, is Tommy enjoying his time off?
I think so.
You think so? He hasn't got a hobby yet, has he?
No, well, we do the ancestry thing, and he works on that quite a bit. He has 4-inch notebooks full of, it's like, documented stuff, so yeah.
My brother does that. Really gets interested in that.
Good morning, Sister Pat.
Good morning. How you
doing? Good morning.
is John.
Isn't that neat?
Oh my word.
Yeah.
He reminds me of.
Of course, it does. Never mind. I lost it. Never mind. I confused it.
He looks like some singer. I can't think of what that guy's name is. No wonder she was attracted to him.
He was cute.
Cute.
I liked his mustache.
Is that your grandson?
No.
No, that's John.
That was-
Duval. Picture of him
Oh,
when they were at their wedding. Doesn't look anything like he looks now.
Well, I saw
And you all are 23.
23,
picture they did.
Our anniversaries are just a day
And,
apart.
Are they?
Yeah.
But that we
Good
had
morning, Brother
for-
Isaac.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Good.
And what's this then? I
Yeah.
didn't hardly know.
Oh.
But he saved it off. I guess he didn't wear it long.
Who, John? He had it for quite a while.
There it is. There's the
Yeah.
picture.
Well, I can't see very
Oh, yeah, he had it for quite a while. I was surprised they gave me that.
That's a good picture.
Oh, you got it on there?
Yeah.
You got, yeah, she got to it faster than I did.
That is
I'll
nice.
see that again. Would never in the world guess that is the same person. Now she can change a whole lot, but my word. That's a really cute picture.
So, Brother Carter,
Yes,
on
ma'am.
Wednesdays, we were trying to decide what studies you were gonna do. I know they said,
We're gonna do Philemon this coming Wednesday night,
okay,
and then we'll do Titus next Wednesday night,
okay,
and we may do First and Second John. I mean, First, Second, and Third John,
second and third John, okay.
since they're only just about 10 verses and 15 verses. They've each got one real important subject that
Titus,
that we might talk about.
okay.
Unless I can find another. I can go back and get Obadiah, but that's in the Old Testament. But I sure learned a lot since I studied those 25 verses in Philemon.
It's amazing.
I didn't know it had such great lessons.
It's amazing what you learn when you're ready to teach a class. You really dig.
Yeah. There's a tremendous lesson in it that you wouldn't have you wouldn't
morning,
know
Sister
that
Karen. How are you?
that it was there unless you brought it out. Let's see, you got Lon and Sheila is gone, and Debbie's not yet here yet, so.
She might be teaching.
Okay, you can, you're probably already there, but page 42, capital F is where we're going to be starting today, I understand. And as we always do, let's go to our Father in prayer. And Isaac, would you lead us in that prayer, please?
Our Father in heaven, we want to thank you for this day and all your wonderful many blessings, your mercy, your grace. We also, Father, want to thank you for this opportunity we had to come together to learn another portion of your word. May the things we hear today take them and apply them in our lives. Father, we ask that you be with the sick and afflicted. Guide us and keep us, Father, always. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, we're starting with our Roman numeral, capital F. Last week, you evidently covered the two of the three parables that Jesus teaches in Luke chapter 15. If you'll notice, the first 3 verses there is the reason why Jesus goes into this, the 3 parables. Then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him, and the Pharisees and the scribes complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." And so he spoke this parable to them, saying. And then he goes into the parable of the lost sheep, where Jesus leaves where the shepherd leaves the 99 at home and goes out and finds the one. And then the parable of the coin, the lost coin, where the lady lost the coin, didn't say how invaluable it was, but where she lost the coin, and she sweeps the house completely until she found that coin. And then, of course, the one today, the parable of the lost son. And this is one that Jesus takes the most time in explaining and bringing out, and we will look at that as we begin our thing. This parable has been called by many scholars today as the picture of the one. It calls it a love story. Really, is what they refer to it as. That it is one of the greatest love stories that has ever been written. And of course, we'll see that as we go along. We're going to read first of all from Luke chapter 15, and we'll read that. And Donna, if you will read down to about verse, let's say verse 24. Read from 11 down to verse 24, and we'll read along with you. Okay?
And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. And now when he had spent everything, severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, and I am dying here with hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out the best robes and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf, kill it, and let's eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again, and he was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate.
Okay, if we could stop right there, it would have been just a fabulous recording. And here you go, Debbie. I didn't get that to you last week. We're on page 42, beginning with F. Okay? And we just got through reading Luke chapter 15, verses 11 down through verse 4. And let's talk about the younger son for just a little bit. I think a lot of our lesson is dealing with him, not so much with the son who stayed at home with his father and was obedient to him, and he worked there with his father. And the attitude of the older son is one that we don't want to adopt ourselves. And so let's see if we can answer some of these questions down through there, and see if we can come up to what the author is trying to get us to see. look at number 1 there. Well, let's see what capital F. A reading of the Lost Boy teaches us many great lessons about straying and restoration. Do you have anything? Anybody have anything filled in there? I couldn't find a word that they may have intended to go in there. Straying and then the restoration. That seems to be about what they're talking about all down through this parable of the lost son. So let's go to number 1. And not all people are alike. How? I looked at just 2 things there. One of it is the disobedience of the younger son, and the obedience of the older son, or the restoration and obedience of the younger son. Either one might fit in there, but I couldn't find any particular passage that would state one or the other. Anybody got anything there that you want to talk about? We know that the younger son didn't like what he was getting at home, and he went to his father and demanded or asked or requested that the father give him his share of the inheritance, and he wanted to leave home. And we know that the father did, and the young son left, and it didn't take very long for him to spend what his father had given him in riotous living, wasteful living, or as the New King Standard, or New King James, the one I've got, that he wasted it in prodigal living, whatever that prodigal might mean there. But he went and wasted it anyway. And you look at the verse 30 of this text, and you'll find out that the older son had a whole different idea of what he did with that money. He went out and spent it on women, the harlots. And of course that may be more right than being a young man. But anyway, he went out and he wasted his money, became broke, and it says that there was a famine. Well, the famine might have been what the young man was experiencing. He was broke, he was down and out, he didn't have any food, he was just totally a homeless individual as far as the picture of it gives. But anyway, we'll go down through this as we go along. Money and friends. Sometimes no money, sometimes no what?
No friends.
No friends. And this is what usually happens when you get out into especially into a gathering that gets his share of the inheritance, which it wasn't the main inheritance, it was the junior son's inheritance. But he got it, and he took it, and he wasted it, and he wound up in a pig pen, really, in the quagmire's sin, from the indication of the picture that we see. And this goes into a lot of things that we talk about in this son going from good to bad, and from we want to get that in our minds if we can, and try to understand what he came out of when he came to himself a little bit later. Just picture, if you can, the quagmire in the words that Jesus gave in this illustration. Number 3, does anybody have anything? What phrase teaches us what tough love is all about? Did you find the verse? I only found one verse that even come close to it, and that was the last verse. If it was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and now is found. Tough love is what? What would you describe as tough love?
It's the hard love. It's the hardest to give sometimes, I would think, because a lot of time it's what people need to hear, not want to hear.
Okay. In our children, when they're doing something and you tell them that's not the right thing to do, and and they still want to do it, and you just keep telling them, no, you're not going to do that. Why are you telling them that? Why?
Because you love them.
Because of the love that you have for them. And when you warn them or you force them not to do something that you know is wrong, that's tough love. Or letting them do something, go ahead and do it. That's the only way you're going to learn. And this is, I don't understand all that the Father might have felt here, but He allowed His Son to go. And He allowed His Son to go, but He still loved Him, didn't He? Yes, ma'am.
That's kind of where I took the deal of tough love on the verse where it says, so He divided to them His livelihood. And so I was looking at that from the point that He let His Son go, and sometimes that's tough love. He did not, in the parable, he did not argue with His Son, which is showing, but He let His Son go to where he had to bump his head. And sometimes, to me, that is the toughest of love, because you know what trouble your child is headed to, but for them to learn the lesson, for them to come to their faith, He had to let him go.
Yeah.
And so that verse there where it says He divided with them their livelihood, that's what I wrote in. So
I think we all have, those of us who have children, grandchildren, we've all told them, don't do that. Touching a fire, an oven, a stove, and you tell them, don't touch that stove because it's going to burn. And sometimes you want to just let them touch that stove so they'll learn the lesson.
And they'll never touch it.
Now, you don't do that because of the love that you have for your son or your daughter. Then you are forcing them to abide by what you know. Why are you forcing them? Because you know it's wrong. You know what the outcome will be. It will be a burnt hand. And then they will, I promise you'll never touch it again. Sometimes they have to learn, and that's tough love. And I think that's what He did, and like you say, He provided for him. This is a son that was not a poor man's son. This family was wealthy. This son was free. This son had sandals on, which was a sign of being free. And he had everything right there. All he had done was stayed with the Father, obeyed Him, and he had still been free. But when he left, and he wasted all that he had, he became a slave. A slave to who? The guy that hired him to watch the pigs or feed the pigs. And so therefore he became a pig watcher, a keeper of pigs. And what does that tell us about the Jewish law?
Well, pigs are unclean.
What a place he found himself. In the very thing that his religion told him was a disgrace, a non-useful entity. Here now he is down to where he was never supposed to be religiously. And when he was hungry, nobody fed him anything. So he had to go down to the pig pen. And there he ate what the pigs ate. I looked that thing up, and I understand that it was something that the poor people all they could afford was this kind of a cob. And I think it's Coral or Coreal. But it was a bitter pod, and that's all the poor people could eat. That's all they could afford. And now here, he's down in the pig pen, lost his freedom. He now is a slave to this master that has him feeding the pigs. I don't know any more words that could describe how far this individual went when he left his father's house. I don't know, I'm not that smart on words, but this man became so low that he lost any insight to what he had.
So I would say, if I were reading that, if I pinpoint a phrase, I would say the phrase, he was dead and now he's alive, because that's extremes, and I think sometimes we kind of take that lightly. Dead, like not alive, and then go to alive. And because he was disobedient, he was being disobedient. Then he was alive because he came back to the Father. But this, if we read through the whole story, I think he's also being tough on the other son too, because the other son is getting upset. Here I've been with you all this time, and he's celebrating the younger son, but he's also teaching the older son too, because he's saying, you've been with me all this time and you're always with me, right? And now let's think about someone else. Let's think about who was lost and now is alive. Yeah. So there's a tough love story within the older son too, because that's tough. Just thinking about my life, I've been in sin and then changed over, but now that I've been a faithful Christian, then you see someone that's been in a really tough life, you think, wow, and now all of a sudden they get to be forgiven, and maybe they hurt you really bad, could be personal, against you, and I know some occasions that things have been, and now you have to learn that his love is not just for you, but it's also for others.
Yeah, the older son, he was obedient as far as the father was concerned, but his attitude toward our subject is very, very poor, because what this particular parable wants to show us is not only did this young man go into sin, but he came to himself. And what did it mean to become or come to himself?
I was thinking of what all he'd done.
Okay.
Where he had been, and now where he was, in the pig pen, unclean.
Okay. Now, what did that force that young man to do?
To go back home.
Repent.
To repent, change heart.
He went back home.
Well,
But how do you think he felt?
He had to humble himself.
All right.
So
I think this is where we're getting in. When a person goes into sin, as this man did, and comes to himself, he has to look at himself in a mirror and see what he really has become. In other words, it's just not, hey, I've wondered everything I've got. I'm going to go home and tell Daddy I'm sorry, and I'm going to go back into the family. That's not what this young man did. He saw himself for what he really was. And he was willing to admit that he was now unworthy of the Father's love or his place in the Father's home. Now, this is an open confession that he realized what he had done, and he had humbled himself to the point that he was willing to face whatever. And when he goes back home, he asks his father, "I'm not worthy except to be a slave in your house." And that's all he would have probably accepted, wouldn't he? He had been glad to be back in his father's house as a servant, because he got more than he had out there, out in the pig pen. And this is, I think, what the author of the book is focusing in on, is what this young man did when he got to the bottom of the pit. And he saw what he was and what he had, and he, all of a sudden, it's like hitting yourself over the head with a baseball bat, getting your attention. And what he had got his attention. He remembered what the Father had. He remembered his status in the Father's home. And now it's not there. Look what I've got now. And when you make a comparison, and you're honest with yourself, how are you going to feel?
Humble.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been to that point in your life, prior to your becoming a Christian? Have you ever reached that bottom? I've come pretty close. Been in the Navy. I went in the Navy at 17 years old. My wife was home, and the first 10 years I was in the Navy, I lived a Navy man's life. And there came a time when I was down to the point of where it had to quit, it had to cease. And of course I've made mistakes since then, but I've never been so far down as I was right after my wife was baptized. And you just look at yourself and you wonder how in the world you ever stooped so low. And you begin to admit it, and then you were willing to confess that this is what you did. No excuse was offered. No blame was placed other than on himself. He didn't blame these people for his pennilessness, but he blamed himself for where he had reached. And this is what repentance is. First of all, we've got to do what? We've got to see ourselves as we really are, as God sees us. And then from there, we are willing to admit that. That's confessing of that sin. And then when we get down to there, we're asking the Father to take us back. And what does the Father do? And here, let's look at verse number 4. Coming to oneself is important. What does it mean? Humbling yourself.
Yeah.
Confessing what you are guilty of, sin. You don't have to itemize every single thing of it. You just confess sin. And then what does that equal? Yes, ma'am.
Know you're lost. Know that you're lost.
Know that you're lost. It's a fact of reality is what it really is. You're actually seeing yourself for the first time of what you really are, what you have, the bottom that you have reached. And then the turnaround comes when you're humbled at you humble yourself down there in the pit. But you're willing to come out of that pit and confess those faults and seek the forgiveness, are we not? And I've often thought the difference between a family that has lived a pretty good life. It's not really, they've lived a good life. Not necessarily a Christian life, but a good life. Their family is all intact, and there's love in all of the family, but they have not obeyed the gospel. Now you take someone in that situation where they've not really been all that bad, and then you take a person that like this guy here, down in the pig pen, and he sees the bottom. Can those who have lived a good life, can they understand the need for humbleness and forgiveness as much as that guy can down in the pig pen? I've often wondered that. Just how much they realize that even though they're good, from a worldly standpoint, they're still lost because they've not obeyed the gospel. But do they really understand the need to humble themselves and to confess that they were in the wrong for not obeying, if nothing else?
Yes.
I've often wondered what goes through a person's mind who lives a good life. My brother, bless his heart, we've talked, I've encouraged him to make his life right with God, and he tells me, he says, but brother, says, I haven't done anything bad. I've been a good father. I take care of my grandkids and great-grandkids. I provide for them. I haven't done really all that bad. And he feels like that God should not hold him guiltless because he has lived. He's drank beer for all of his life, but he doesn't do that now. And he doesn't have many more days left. He's got one lung and half of another. He can't walk from the front room to the mailbox and back without giving out. So he needs to think. But he can't see himself as God sees him. He just can't do it, and because he hadn't obeyed the gospel. No matter how good he is, he hadn't obeyed the gospel, he's lost. Cornelius is a good example of that, is he not? Even though he prayed daily, he gave alms to the people, he was still lost, even though he's all that good. And this is what this young man has to come to the realization that he was lost. And he was willing to admit it. He was willing to humble himself down. So look at verse number 5. What was the lost boy's confession?
Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.
Before you and before God and men. And he makes the confession that he was willing to serve in the Father's house if he could just come back. Number 6, list any qualities you see of the Father and of the prodigal son.
Forgiveness.
A lot of good qualities.
Forgiveness. And repentance.
Willingness to obey, or willingness to confess the sin, humbling himself. On the Father's side, he loved his son. He kept looking for his son. when he saw his son coming, what did he do?
Ran and kissed
Ran
him.
out to meet him. And so, in the Christian's life, the lesson there is when we are ready to return to the Father is ready to receive him with open arms. But he has to come back how? Could this son go into the household and sit down at the table and eat without ever talking to his father? Or no, he couldn't do that. Father wouldn't allow it anyway. But now you take a Christian today who's fallen away, and he comes back in and sits on the back seat of the church building. 3 or 4 months goes by, and he goes from the back seat to the middle seat to up front. What state is that Christian in?
Still lost.
He's not. Sorry to say. If he has strayed away, and he has become a forsaker of the assemblies, he's not living his Christian life. He's out there in the world doing what he wants to do, as he wants to do it. And then all of a sudden he gets a bright light. Hey, I need to get back in cahoots with the Lord. And so he comes in the church building, he sits on the back seat, nobody says too much to him. But how is he with God? What is his relationship? Because what does he have to do?
Repent.
That's
He's got
confess his
to
sins.
repent of that wickedness or that sinfulness that he had while he was gone. Everybody knows he was straight. Everybody knew it. And sin that's public must be confessed publicly.
3 times.
3 times.
I found it only 3 times.
I found it too.
I just found it 3 times.
Yeah.
That's what I found 3 times.
That verses 3 or verse 5, 6, and 9. But in each of these 3 parables, there was rejoicing made, was it not?
Yeah.
After the sheep was found, there was rejoicing. After the corn was found, there was rejoicing. And after the Christian comes home, there is rejoicing, is there not? When I was preaching in Arkansas, we had a young lady, or young man, I think, a young person that came forward on an average of, I don't know, every 3 or 4 months, they'd come forward and they would confess sin and seek forgiveness. And more than one, as we went, as the preacher always does, shakes them out the door. More than one person has made the comment concerning this young person. Well, it won't be long before he'll be doing the same old thing he has always done. Making fun of the individual that came forward and made the confession of sin. What a bad attitude that person had, or those people had, who looked down upon this individual because he felt the need to make a public confession of sin and seeking the forgiveness of God. How many times are you allowed to do that? 7 times
7
7?
times 7.
Huh?
Times 70, I think. All right.
7 times 70 would
Yeah.
like it, huh?
Yeah.
If that person felt that need and come forward and confess sin, instead of looking down upon that individual, they ought to be rejoicing of that individual. They ought to be happiness. Yes, ma'am.
I've always admired people who have the courage to come forward like that. I mean, that takes a lot of courage to come in front of everybody and to admit it. I always, and the people you're talking about were bad about them, they were like the older son. They really didn't think much of them.
Yeah. And when you look at the comparison between the two, the older son has never experienced what the younger son did. He stayed home. His father took care of him, and he helped his father, he obeyed his father. But the attitude of the father when the lost son come home, when the lost sheep was there, what did he do? I didn't have to worry about my older son. He was obedient. He works in the fields. He was being my son. But here's one that I've lost.
I never thought he should have given him the money to begin with. Just, you have to die before you get your inheritance. He had to die before the guy got his inheritance. No, he should have given him the money to begin with. That's what I always thought.
Yeah.
Me too.
And
Like he's like an enabler or something. Why didn't he pretend to begin with?
Well, tough love, you know. They don't have to find
He
out.
wasn't
Yeah.
going to get it
Yeah.
anymore. Bag it though, at least.
But if we look down, now here I am. I'm been faithful. I go to church 365 days a year. I worship God every Sunday. Pat me on the back. How good I am in comparison to you, who intermittently comes and you don't ever read your Bible. Blah blah blah. All these things that draw us away. Do I have any right to look down upon him?
No.
No. I have a responsibility of loving him, trying to help him become strong. But I should never look down into my nose at anybody. And that's what the older son was doing to the younger son.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting the merrymaking that the younger son got when he came home. And so when we talk about these, I got 4 pages of notes here. I hadn't looked at it yet. But when we look at this lost boy, look at verse, surely a good time for Christians to rejoice is when the lost soul has been restored. I've seen restorations where a lot of tears were shed by not only the individual that was restored, but by those who knew what he was guilty of, and they saw him coming back, confessing those things, or confessing those sins and asking God to forgive. And that's a lot better than what these individuals did there where I preached. But anyway, Romans chapter 12 and verse 15, Philippians 3 verses 1, 3, and 4 teach us the importance of what?
Rejoicing.
Rejoicing.
And we,
Our attitude, the faithful attitude would be that when one comes home, we are happy indeed, and we rejoice that he has made, or they have made that commitment. And so, let's go on down. The other members of the church are critical when one is restored. Can you give an example? And I just did. Some people can't, but preachers usually can give an example of that during their time that they spend in the pulpit. How does the word others fit in this story? We are to esteem others how? Better than ourselves.
the preacher shouldn't be critical if someone,
Ma'am?
I said, preachers shouldn't be critical if someone comes forward and, you know.
Yeah.
You're saying sometimes preachers can see.
We cannot see it. When a person comes forward, the attitude ought to be that he's sincere that he has committed a crime, he's committed a sin that he wants God to forgive him of. Now that's the way we should look at this. That he feels as though he is in need of forgiveness. And the faithful Christian who doesn't do that very often should not look down on that individual simply because he feels as though he should come forward and have God forgive him. But these people were telling me, commenting to me, that it's not going to be 3 or 4 months and he'll be right back down here again. Well, that may be. He may be weaker than some people. He may need more forgiveness than others. But that doesn't make me better than he is. The same blood runs through my vein that runs through his. The same temptations may not be the same, but they're there.
I think that's why Jesus spoke a lot of times about our heart diseases and attitudes, because it is a problem, okay? Because we're human beings, and Jesus, he knows us. So he addresses our bad attitudes. And he addresses our bad attitudes in the sense that if you don't get your attitude right, you're not getting to heaven. It does not matter how many times you come when the door is open. If we're not able to rejoice with those who are lost, if we're not able to be merciful, but God is merciful unto us every day, then you're not going to get to heaven. I don't care how many times you come to worship service. So Jesus spoke about our attitudes, our dispositions, because it is serious. Because the where we come together as a body of people should feel welcome. All the laws to say you should feel like this is home. You should feel welcome. These are godly people trying to serve God in the matter where God will have us. Because we're always lost and we all were found. And it's not because of our own accord, it's because of God Almighty. So we have to get our attitudes in check. Because our attitudes, our disposition, if we don't get it right with God, then we're not going to get to heaven. Because he told us we have to become as a little child.
All right. We've got time. Our time's up anyway. But the thing of it is, we are to give a person as much leeway and as much support as we possibly can until we see that they intend not to. Then your attitude changes. Then you have a discipline problem that you have to deal with. Okay? All right. Hopefully Jared will be back next Sunday.
So you ready to hit the road, lady? Y'all leaving when? In the morning. Okay.
I'm ready. I don't know if my back's ready.
Okay. But you say y'all just gonna drive, what, 3 hours a day and then the
No, about
rest?
300 miles.
About 300 miles. Okay.
Debbie, how are you doing today? Good.
Hello, Sister Carter. How you doing? Glad to see you. I love that orange.
Hello.
Hi, Miss Debbie. Good, how are you?
Have trouble looking
How
up
you
the
doing today?
messages, but,
Good. Huh?
you know, I've always thought that the parable of the lost boys, I mean, it went over just individuals. It went through like, the Jews versus the Gentiles, and the Jews being so proud, thinking they were so right. And the lost son was the rest of the world, and even Jews that finally did come back, but he was in the middle of all these Pharisees then, and they would be like the older son. They'd never done anything wrong. And so It was a parable, but they couldn't see it. Jesus taught in parables to those people.
Oh, yeah, that was a parable he told to some of the Jews and Pharisees. Okay. No, they,
I mean, it's all true, and you could individually, yes, it's true. Whatever he said is true. But
they
Jesus came to, he was trying to show them he was the Messiah.
yes.
And he would talk to them in parables. And God said, even though they hear, they won't hear. And even though they're looking, they won't see.
Yes, Pat, yes. Yeah, in my class on Wednesday, we're talking about, we're studying John 8, 9, 10, in there, how the Pharisees when he told them he was God's son, they thought he had a demon, and they
killed him.
Anything that related to God, him coming from heaven.
Right.
They had their ears closed.
They just.
How are you, Debbie?
Good, how are you doing?
I have been doing good.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I really have. I think I'm glad most people have been doing good, for sure. It seems like, some people have been through a lot, like Jack, with his problems.
Yeah.
And of course, Mary and Laura right now, she's trying to take care of him.
Yeah, that's hard.
And it is very hard for her. So, to be blessed like we are, we seem to be thankful.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely.
Things could get worse.
My son's at home. Excuse me while I do this. And I love it. He just kind of challenges me sometimes because he's not, he won't blatantly tell me don't go to church or anything. Matter of fact, I told him that I wanted to not go have a full-time job because it interferes with what my lifestyle is.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, those are important. And then I told him, Bible class, helping people, making, going and taking lunch to people, that kind of thing. And I said, so I don't really want to go back to work. And he says, those things are important, And so he says that, but at the
He
same
says
time.
the things that you're doing are important.
Mm-hmm.
Work's more important to him.
It's not important to him. No,
I mean, that you go to work.
Well, he didn't say
more
that either.
important to you than going to church.
Actually, he was like, I understand, Mom. And plus, I was saying, I want to be free. I want to be free to go wherever you or your brother is, because one day you will have children and all that. And I'm trying to plan for that so I can, have freedom and still make an income, because I know I'm going to need an income for many years. So I want to plan that I can still have an income, but have the freedom to go wherever you are. That way I can rotate. But an ideal job would be go wherever Josiah is, wherever his family is, for a couple of weeks, and then wherever Josh is.
That's going to be a computer job.
Or
Because
some kind of remote something.
Something that can reach.
And that's why I wanted to get my business going. Also, I feel like I need to be a little beacon in the light of darkness, because some of those things are just incredible. I mean, there's just so much that goes on that people deceive people all the time, and I just feel like at least I'd be doing some good by doing that.
Sure. Anything you can put out there to show that
Yeah, but I don't
doing
know.
the right thing is the right thing to do.
Yeah, so
But it would be hard to cover much ground. Care.
Yeah, but it's not a big deal. Anyway, I love Ben, and he just, there's some challenges, but at the same time, I feel like I'm good to both of my sons. You know, I try to continue
you're
to
a
be
good
an
mother.
example.
I can think back on my mother and I can just thank God I had a godly mother. I didn't have such a godly father, but
I've done some things
Mother-
that I'm not
mother
too proud
kind
of.
well, I had two. I had two.
Sin, you know, had sin in
Yeah,
my life too.
I'm like a prodigal son.
In a lot of ways, I've been shamefully.
Prodigal daughter.
But you know, he's talking about, I get what he's saying about they're good. You're wondering if those people can really understand. Before that became a Christian, high school, you know,
heaven, we come before thee at this time, in the most humble manner that we know how, with thanksgiving in our hearts. Thank you, thee, for all the things you've done for us. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for thy Son who came to this earth with a perfect life and died. That through him, in the contact of his blood, baptism, we can become thy children. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for the word. We thank you for writing to us, through thy inspiration, everything that we need to know to please thee and be profitable for us. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for this local congregation and the people that work here. We thank you, Heavenly Father, at this time for the grace that you showed to us. And through obedience to thy word, we call thee our Father, and you call us your Son. We thank you, Heavenly Father, that we can be joint heirs with Christ, who is our Lord and Savior. We ask you, Heavenly Father, this time to be with us and help us to be unified in this local work. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to help us to endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit and all the peace. We pray, Heavenly Father, that you be with each and every one of us and help us to put aside our thoughts and our ideas on scriptures and go with them to the truths that are written therein. We pray, Heavenly Father, for those of our members who are unable to be with us on a regular basis due to family fears and finding else, we ask you to be with them and strengthen them and use us, and the Father, as tools to make their lives better. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to be with those who are sick at this time, restore them to a portion of their health so they can walk in their simple with you. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for the prayers answered on behalf of some of the people that are against you in the past. We know, Heavenly Father, that you will now know the thoughts and cares of every one of us. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to help us in our individual lives to continue to pray without ceasing, to study thy word so that we can glorify you here on this earth and receive a home in heaven. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to be merciful and to forgive us. We know, Heavenly Father, that you have promised to do so when you hear those who come before you and ask. All these things are in our hearts and our minds this morning, Heavenly Father, and we bring them before you through thy Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. that, we're gonna ask you to body, living in the presence, right in our lives. And have to take this time to give back a portion of what we have given them. And to pray that we give it with a glad heart, cheerful heart, and that the funds be used, the funds be the word, spread your word among these who are that we give this person. point, around the second Thessalonians, chapter 3, though we condemn for sin to be well. And the context is a little bit different than the discussion of the lesson today. But he makes the point in the second Thessalonians, chapter 3, verse 10, for when we are weak, we command to do this, if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. And he talks about the difference between the lazy person who's busy body and someone who's working. So the point is, God has provided us with everything that we possibly need. What will make our clothes out of? Synthetic material. I'll go back to something here. Synthetic material is not the real thing. He gives us that we can clothe ourselves with. He gives us material that we build our houses with. He gives us stuff that we can eat. And then on and on and on. God has provided for the offspring. For man is created. Look at the construction of Adam in Genesis chapter 3, verse 17 to 19. Now the good here is looking at the Father who is the Lord. Father, we have a responsibility to provide for our family. Going back to the very beginning, the children of Adam and Eve, after they were driven out of the garden, and this not to be more difficult for Adam. He said to Adam, he said, the whole because of you to the voices of God, and that each from the tree which I commanded you to shall not eat. Notice what he said. First is he surrounded with the face, flows from eating it all the life, and going to this is to bring forth more of you, so you hear the ground. He says, the pleasure of many, so he bread, he will return to the ground, rather than to the face. For that you are in that you shall occur. Now, I think the cause is probably not the most of the future that you have to do. But here's the point. That was the person that Adam was on. Just as God takes care of man physically, Adam is instructed to take care of his family physically. Paul makes the point over in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, that if a man does not provide for his own, his word is his. Now, the context is a little different. Talking about the point of widows, but the truth still stands in that. So, fathers, we have to stop and think. With my family, with my wife, and my children, how am I going to provide for them? How am I going to take care of them? Some of the families like work, it's not the point of the sermon. One of the sermons is father has this responsibility. And so we need to take this seriously. And I would suggest that even something more important though is this. What God has done for man and you know, spiritual level. Turn with me, if you would, to John chapter 6, verses 39 and 40. We find here in John chapter 6, verses 39 through 40, Jesus says that God is God teaches man. The sermon of John 6 and 3 reference any party to its own cause they neglected to accomplish. Under the new covenant, things are a little bit different, and this is the way that we read in the text. Get there, Hebrews chapter 12, go back up to verse 3. He talks about, he said, well, consider him who has your such hostility to sin himself. But where is this very? So right off the bat, he talks about this true, because we are Christians. So, and then he says, world. The great man, you know what this was? He ultimately sent Jesus. He sent Jesus to this earth to live in the flesh, to die and be the ultimate sacrifice. And I've often wondered the whole thing here right now. We'll take this why did he have to die? Why did he have to live in the flesh, die in the flesh, and be brought back to life by the Heavenly Father? Why was that the purpose of that sacrifice? So the world is going to go long. No. The decision for Christ to die was established before the law was given. I believe the sacrifice of the law was given to help us finally understand our to lead them up so they would appreciate the rest of God. The doctrine